What's on, where, and when. It's the Talk of Nelson. NBS Talk Nelson.
At NBS, we believe in banking for life. For over 160 years, we've been a trusted banking provider for generations of locals like you. We know our clients personally and build long-term relationships with them, offering flexibility by giving our staff freedom to make quick decisions to put them first. Experience banking for life with NBS.
The Mako Rugby Roundup.
Welcome to the Mako Rugby Roundup. I'm Chris Butler and welcome back to Les Edwards once again. We're thrilled to bring you all things rugby in the top of the South, and it's great. Welcome back to our special guest, Tony Lewis, former CEO of the Tasman Rugby Union. Great to have you here, Tony.
Yeah, thanks very much for the invite.
Back to slightly colder weather conditions after being in the tropics of WA, but nice to be home.
Yeah, look, we haven't actually found it that cold, to be honest. The weather here, a good 28 degrees is about a 42 in Perth, and I'm still in shorts. No, it's been fantastic to be home. We were always planning to get home about this time for Olivia to start high school, so it works well for us.
Oh, fantastic. Before we dive in more, a big shout out to the Turf Hotel on Main Road, Stoke. Thank you to Stan and the team for their continued support. The lineup for this weekend, Thursday, tomorrow night, it's jam session once again. You still haven't made it, Les, so I guess you still got to get there. Friday, which is Matariki, 5 o'clock, there's two bands on Friday night. 5 o'clock, it's One Night Stand, and 9 o'clock, it's Hysteria. And then Saturday night, it's Trilogy at 9 o'clock. Sunday, the meat raffle's on again, $2,000. So well worth coming down. In this episode, we're going to be catching up with all things First 15 Rugby, Senior Men's and Women's Tasman Trophy. Of course, we're going to be talking about the Super Rugby final and the All Black selection, Les.
Yes.
Some interesting calls there, and Tony, we'll get your view on it as well. But first of all, you left Tasman as CEO in 2021, and you've just returned after 3 years with the Western Force. So what are you up to these days?
I'm considered semi-retirement, so that's what I had went with the process of, and then playing golf one day with Les. He said, "But what do you want to do?" And I said, "Oh, running a golf club might be, part-time, be quite good." So I'm up at the golf club at Matai and loving every minute, the Waihi Takaroa Club, doing probably 20 to 30 hours a week, depending on the week. Been doing that for 10 days now. So
yeah, right.
It gets me out of bed in the morning. And then I'm also looking down the governance roles. I've been appointed to 2 governance roles.
Oh.
They're just waiting to officially be announced. So really excited about that. One in government and the other in a bit of a area that I'm really excited to can make a difference within the community. So
Wow.
That's what I'm doing. And other than that, I do the school pickup, school drop off, cook the dinners while Steph's forging her career. She's followed me for the last 15 years and she's really got involved in her career and is working for the car company as a business manager.
Oh, right. Fantastic. Just because Peter Watson, he was the previous administrator up there, wasn't he? And
He was.
I remember him talking about moving on. So good timing, just having to be there.
Well, I just happened to be playing a game of golf with Les, and Les was sort of at me, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" And sort of threw an off-cuff comment. When we had a beer, he introduced me to Pete, and then the ball started to roll, and it was just trying to work out if, did it work for me? Did it work for the golf club? Probably more importantly. And from my perspective, it's been good fun so far.
Yeah, it's a good club, good bunch of people up there, and nice and social. But they take their golf seriously too.
Yeah, like all good golf clubs, the Waihi Takaroa locals know the rules. We'll question you on them, but I like the place very much, and I do like the fact that there's a hard-working committee there to support Tony. So it'll be great times.
Yeah, and I think the best thing about it, it's a real cross-section of demographics who play there. There's a large number of people who actually live in the Stoke area play out there. So we're looking at the demographics yesterday. So look, they're all good funds, but as we know with golfers, the greens are going to be perfect, and the tees are going to be perfect. And I played with Les last week, and he shot an interesting round, and it was, of course, the Greens' fault, the
Yeah,
team's
right,
fault,
right.
and,
Yeah.
and nothing about his play.
Yeah, 3 putts are always a danger.
Yes. Oh, all right. Let's get on and talk about all things rugby, the first 15 rugby. And gee, it's, turning into a pretty good season all round for the region, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And for Waimea combined, who have won their 4th game. So they travelled to Hornby High and beat Mako combined by 31 points to 5. So they're still undefeated for their season. And then quadrangular tournament kicked off with the first semi-finals on Tuesday. I went out there, massive crowd, really good crowd, beautiful day. First of all, Christ College 31 beat Whanganui Collegiate 10, followed by Nelson College putting Wellington College to the sword by 47 points to 0. Unheard of scoreline, Tony, in quad rugby.
Yeah, look, I coached Christ College for 6 years in that quad tournament, and Wellington College were always the strongest school. And you hope, like hell, that you didn't get them in the first round. So that's an incredible score. And considering they also, I think they won quad last year in Wellington. But the Nelson College First 15 is an exceptional coach group. Jono and the team have done a brilliant job over 6 or 7 years. But I probably, from my perspective, also look here at Waimea combined. I remember many years ago going around all the headmasters, trying to convince them to have a combined team. And that team has produced a number of Mako players, Mako Springer being the latest. And it's crucial for this area to have rugby in every school, secondary school, both girls and boys.
Yeah, well, Waimea combined have probably struggled a little bit over the last few years, but certainly this year, they're starting to hit their straps, aren't they? Because of some great results.
Yeah, I'm very pleased for them. They've got Don McLean and others out there coaching the side and doing a good job. But look, long may it continue as far as I'm concerned, because yes, we like to highlight our 3 first 15 teams in the UC Championship, and as long as we've got 3 strong contributing colleges, then Tasman Rugby will be better off. So what's going to happen is on Thursday, Nelson College will play Christ College in the final. And on what I saw, will go in as favourites, of course. In round 6 of the UC Championship, Waimea combined are hosting Christ College second 15. Now that's going to be at 12 p.m. On Saturday at Sports Park, Motueka. So they're taking a second game out to Motueka to support all of those parents and whānau who are contributing players to the team from out that way. And Marlborough boys are away to St Andrews College.
Yeah, that'd be worth a look, wouldn't it? Taking on Christ College in Motueka, that'd be a good game to watch. Good luck to Waimea, and of course, good luck to College in the final, that's for sure. Senior Men's Tasman Trophy, round 13, and how are things looking?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, and we've talked to Motory, and we're big fans of theirs and their endeavour to stay relevant in the competition and not to forfeit. That was their goal. But unfortunately, on the weekend, they had to do that. They just ran out of cattle. So they forfeited to Waimea Old Boys. Stoke travelled over the hill with Stan from the Turf Hotel on the bus, expecting that there would be a close contest there, but to no avail. Sexral 71 beat Stoke.
I know. There's no way I would have picked that. It just goes to show that, it shouldn't. It won't pick it up. But I don't know why it's doing that, but that's okay. We'll edit that part. I would have never picked that. I mean, Central obviously just really hitting their straps now.
Yes.
Unless Stoke, were a few cattle short.
Well, they don't know the background as to whether or not they were short or not, but that's an amazing scoreline. And then in the other game, Marist went to Sports Park Motueka with a view to try and knock over Kahurangi, but Kahurangi prevailed 28-18. And I have to say that was on the back of a fantastic performance by William Havili, who's back from Moana Pacifica. When you get a player of that calibre in club rugby, they really do make a difference. He had 3 moments with ball in hand and kicked a drop goal. Just a terrific performance. So Kahurangi pleased to beat Marist in the mud.
Yeah, I saw the live feed, and it definitely Looked a bit slippery out there, that's for sure. All right, Les. So round 14, how are they lining up? And this is where we do some picks. And Tony, you probably haven't had a chance to have an in-depth look, but we still want your best guess. So Muteri versus Stoke at Awarua Park. So what are you thinking, Tony?
Well, I was speaking to Stan before, and Stoke lost 7 players during the game last week, and they were 3 down before they got there. He tells me Kane Robinson's got a leg injury, so Motri probably owes their supporters something. So I'll put my neck out here and I'll call a draw.
Hey, go the Magpies.
Well, like you say, they'll be itching to get on the park, won't they, after a couple of defaults? So they'll want to put a result on the park. But yeah, just Stoke were just travelling so well, weren't they?
Yeah, they're playing very, very good football.
They've consolidated third spot on the, this is the final round coming up. So they've consolidated third spot. So they'll just lick their wounds and get back up for semi-final rugby.
I'm going to jump to Karangi versus Nelson at Cook's Reserve. So what are your thoughts on that one?
Look at Rewalker, Karangi, from what I saw on the weekend, they'll be far too strong for Nelson.
And the reason that I jump one is that Marist take on Waimea Old Boys at Hunanui Field, and he's wearing green. He often wears green. There's a lot of bias. So thoughts on that one? That's actually going to be quite a tough match, isn't it? Because Marist hasn't really gone their way of recent times.
Yeah, and they love to blame me for losing grand final a couple of years ago. So, so look, from my perspective, I think Marist and Waimea, they've battled many years, very, very close games and finals, semi-finals and grand finals, and this looks like another one that will go down to the wire. So I wish both teams the best, and it's really important because both will secure a final spot.
Yes, to the victor goes the spoils in this one. So whoever wins will be in the playoffs. Whoever loses will be having a mad Sunday. So,
what are you calling on that one, Tony? A draw?
We can't do that.
What I'm hearing is Les is hoping that they lose so he can pull up stumps for the year. But no, I think Waimea will win that one. So I just think Waimea got a number of players who are pushing for Mako's selection. And also, I think a number of their veterans, this will be their last season. So I think in a very, very close game, they'll win this one.
Right, there you go, Les.
Oh, no,
you can give that feedback in the change rooms.
Yeah, I'll be backing my Marist boys to get up. It's at Tahuna Nui Field. As Tony says, a lot of epic battles have been played between these two sides, invariably, 3 points or thereabouts in it. So it'll be a close tussle for sure.
So you remember the time Barada kicked the goal from 60 metres?
I do. I also remember the times Marist have knocked in over in the last minute too. So look, it all swings and roundabouts, with rugby.
On a personal note, I'd love Marist to win, but I think Waimea is stronger.
Rightio, there you go, and it's all to play for. Karangi on 47, Central 44, and geez, aren't they coming into some form? Stoke with some work to do, and it's all to do with the Wobbers and Marist on Saturday. So Muteri and Nelson making up the tail there. As we turn our attention to senior women's Tasman Trophy, round 8, and how did that go, Les?
Oh, as you'd predict, the top two teams are definitely Marist and Karangi, and they both got wins. Karangi 41-17 over Waimea Old Boys, and Marist travelled to Awarua Park and came home with a 22-11 win. So this is round 8 coming up. Karangi are playing Moteri. But interestingly, this is one of those situations where Karangi forfeited to Moteri in the past. So this is a Karangi game, but at Spring Creek. So, yeah. And then Waimea Old Boys are hosting Marist at Jubilee Park. That game is going to be on Matariki Friday night.
Right. Well, that'll be good. A chance to get along and catch it. So Jubilee Park, so they've got lights there, haven't they? So plenty of good lighting down there. So worth a trip for the family. Marist on 35, Karangi on 22. So Marist well and truly ahead there. Muteri on 10 and Waimea Old Boys. So they'll just, what do they do there? Still have a semi, or do they go straight into the final?
At the end of regular season, which is 2 more weekends, the top team will go straight into the grand final, and then 2 will play 3.
Right. Okay. looking like Karangamuteri. So we'll see how that goes. Senior men Division 2, we always like to highlight a couple of the games, especially in the rural areas. So Nelson Bay's round 10.
Yes, last week we highlighted the fact that it was the Battle of the Bridge at Takaka. And I had Takaka winning this one just because they have been stronger all year. But Collingwood got up. Collingwood 14 beat Takaka 11. So you could imagine Core Strange and Mark Strange and all of the locals in Collingwood would have dined out on this one, much to the chagrin of Duncan McKenzie and his mates.
I think it's really important for Collingwood. They've had a tough year, and they're really Gore Strange has kept that team alive for probably 30 years. So they're looking at what does it look like for them next year. So this win hopefully will rejuvenate the club, get them settled down for another season next year. Really important. I heard the Stoke game out here in the weekend was a fantastic game of football as well in the Div 2.
Oh, right. Yeah. Now, what was that result? Because didn't they... Was it this weekend they got tipped up, or was that the previous
weekend they lost to Maris?
That's right.
To lose their undefeated record. But yes, they did get a win. The highlight for this weekend is another Battle of the Bridge.
Yeah.
So we've got Rewalker playing Huia. It's the Battle of the two Motueka clubs. So
yeah.
That'll be awesome. In Marlborough last week, we highlighted Central playing Renwick, and Renwick had a good win, 46-12 over Central. This week, I think the game to watch is Waitoa against Central. That's 2 versus 3, and that's at Endeavour Field.
Yeah, Renwick leading the charge there. Waitoa second, Central third, Awatiri in fourth, and then leading Div 2 Nelson Stoke. Not too far behind actually.
Yeah.
And actually even Wanderers not too far behind, and Taki are actually done quite well. So that's been quite a tight competition this year.
Yeah, it's good to see the country clubs performing very, very well.
The Super Rugby final, and pretty much was one-way traffic, wasn't it? But now I can't remember if I watched the whole game, but I watched most of it, and Blues pretty dominant, weren't they?
Yeah, like from my perspective, I thought the Blues they've really dominated the season in the forward pack, and they give the front football to a very, very exciting back line. I think it was really important for New Zealand rugby. Les and I have debated this all week, and I've kept to my place that New Zealand rugby needed the Blues and needed the Auckland region to have a victory in rugby. They're under a real siege mentality against the Wars up there, and I think it'll be good for the fact that we've got 50,000 plus people at the game. Which was fantastic. The number of young kids going to the game for the first time, a victory in 21 years. So I think it's a really, really important. It was a really important day for NZ Rugby for the Blues to win, and I congratulate Andrew Hoare and Vern. And at least we not forget that Liam McDonald seems to be the Cinderella to all these sort of things. He takes teams all the way to get them to the finals and never gets to win one. But I know, speaking to Paul Tito earlier in the day, before the game, that he acknowledged all the work that Leon had done. So congratulated him as well.
Look, for me, it was just the most remarkable performance of smash mouth forward play you could hope to see. And at the end of the game, what I was blown away by was that the forward pack were so proud of themselves, and you could see that they just were excited that they'd done exactly what Fern Cotter had asked them to do, and they'd done it for 80 minutes. They were relentless in their forward play, and that just allowed the sort of quality of some of the backs to shine through. So I was mightily impressed with that Blues performance.
Especially the captain. I mean, that's an incredible performance, but all their big guns stood up. It was interesting to see how many of the Blues forward pack didn't make the All Blacks. And I think that's more to do with the style of rugby that Scott Robinson and his coaches want to play. Because I think all of us probably would have picked a hooker in our All Black team. But they obviously, he doesn't play in those wide channels, so he doesn't suit the game. But that was, as Les said, it was they topped off a magnificent season of playing very much like a French team or a South African team where they just dominated up front.
Yeah, and the old adage always used to be a strong Auckland side, a strong All Black side. So, but if we turn our attention to the All Black selection, bit of a mixed bag. So it wasn't dominated by Auckland at all. So if we look at the forward pack, any surprises to you?
I thought that they might have gone with a fourth lock and picked Sam Darry. I thought Riccatelli deserved the third hooker spot. And of course, that whole debate around Satutu v Satiti, I had Satutu in my squad, but in my pick. So your thoughts?
Yes, it's hard. I got 29 out of the 32 right, so I think they just about nailed it. I think the one for me is Jacobson. I just don't believe he's an All Black. I reckon he's a really good super player, and I would have picked Satutu, but obviously he doesn't do enough off the ball, and that's their problem. In the regards to the forward pack, it seems like if you don't throw a good line-out ball, you get picked as a hooker. So I was very surprised that Bell got picked, but it was a pretty predictable forward pack, a bit like Les. They only went with 3 locks, but we've had a history. Remember back to the 2015 World Cup, only going with 3 locks. And I think it wouldn't hurt Sam to sort of floating around the All Black environment. He'll get a game with the All Black 15 and then have a really good NPC season. I think that might do him well for the end of the season too. So the forwards are pretty predictable, and it's great to see, Tyrell Lomax and Blackadder, even though I noted he plays for Canterbury now, which they obviously got wrong, and Lomax plays for Wellington.
Don't worry, mate. The
Yes,
fans on Twitter pick that up very quickly.
So just on to Tutu then. You just mentioned before he doesn't do enough off the off the ball, and equal highest try scorer. What is it that he has to do to make the team? They obviously saw in Satiti a bit of a future, and maybe he's had a great season, but that's someone they can work with. What is it about Satutu that they don't see?
I think the other way to look at it, young Wallace, he made 20 tackles in the 59 minutes that he was on for the Chiefs, in a team that was being beaten. Apparently his passing, putting people in holes was high. And the other thing that was very, very high was his meters gained in a team that got absolutely smashed. I don't think Satutu can do anything more than he's doing. I think he's playing exceptional rugby. I would have picked him in my team. I would have had him ahead of Jacobson, because I just think he's one of those players that's a really good super player. And I think Scott Robinson and Jason Ryan would have taken Satutu to the next level. And it's a shame for him. And I hope he doesn't follow, reading the paper today, he can play for Fiji, he can play for Samoa, he can play for England, and he can play for the USA. I hope he just stays here, because I think he could be an absolute champion for the All Blacks in the future.
It only takes one injury, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Won't bide your time. So if we look to the back line, I mean, obviously number 10 was pretty predictable, wasn't it? But I
had Plummer as my bolter before the game, and then he had an amazing 80 minutes. With the way he steered the team around the park, as kicking out a hand and for goal. I thought he was after that performance, he was my third first 5, but they've gone for a bunch of they've gone for Mackenzie, Barrett and Perifetta as cover. So they haven't picked an out-and-out fullback. So that's an interesting one, but I guess they're waiting for Will Jordan.
Well, yes, waiting for Will Jordan. I don't know when he's due to come back, but
3 weeks.
Is that right? Oh, okay. So that close.
He's training now and doing contact.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's what I'd say. That's what
I'll make a prediction. He'll play the first 2 Mako games before he's taken to the All Blacks.
Right.
You hear that,
for us.
Mako fans? Get your season tickets once the board approves the pricing.
But you do
knife in the back.
You do have a couple of Barrett boys there that can play fullback, and also Perifetta can play first 5, can't he? So he's played first 5 before,
but I think they see him now as a fullback, and he's the cover. So it's likely that they're going to have those 3 in the 23.
Yeah. Just as long as they get rid of the kicking.
Yeah, I think the interesting one on the back line, and you look at Perifetta, he would have been the first 5'8" in the Blues team in the grand final if Zane Sullivan was available. Vern Cotter even said that. And no matter how well Harry played, and he played exceptionally well, and probably his best season as Super Rugby, Stephen Pettifera was the 5'8" for most of the season until he got injured. In the All Black team in the back line, I probably think, and I said to Razor at the time, I sent him a text, that the Hurricanes Chiefs games, a number of the Hurricanes players would have played their way out of the All Blacks. and showed they're probably a year away. And I think Proctor has been my form centre all year. I look at the back line, I think they lack leadership, and I know it's interesting to see David Havili, he's been injured all year, has been called into the train-on squad, but I would have been tempted to have him in my team ahead of Proctor, remembering that he kicked Will Jordan out of the fullback position for 2 years at the Mako and at the Crusaders for a couple of years. So I just think they'll miss Dave's leadership. But again, for the Tasman Mako season, if they've got Will Jordan and Havili in the back line.
Yeah, that's
For a
right.
couple of
Not
games.
bad.
Yeah, well, I think they might have Dave for the whole season. So I think,
Jeez,
and he's not just a captain; he's a leader.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly know that, and we'll talk about his leadership in the interview. But yeah, it was a test that, you know, I think most people sort of might have missed picking 3 out of the 32, 3 or 4 out of the 32. It was a good squad in the end, and you know, there's a train-on squad of 4 players, and then there's the Māori All Black tour to keep some people fit. So
Yeah, and squads change, don't they? Because, you know, it depends on how they go at test level, and then you've got an overseas tour, and, you know, things evolve over time. You've got injury, so you never know what's going to happen. But this England side that's coming, it's not going to be easy, is it? They gave Japan a good smashing, didn't they?
Yeah, I thought they would have put more on Japan than that. I mean, and we were expecting an All Black team to put 60, 70 on that. I think the interesting thing when you look at the All Black team is I heard Stephen Donald say on the radio, Ian Foster would have probably chosen the same team, which is an interesting thing. There wasn't that new player that selection, that bolter that we go, well, that's got Razor all over it.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, that's an interesting thing. But
well, that might be George Bell. I don't think many people saw after his Super Rugby season, where he's a quick rugby player and strong boy, but his line-out throwing wasn't up to scratch. So I think he's the bolter from my point of view. So, hey, listen, a quick shout-out. The Tasman Mako had 3 All Blacks.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. Lomax, Blackadder and Finlay Christie.
Yes.
And Max Hicks got selected for the Māori All Blacks. So the black jersey tradition that began under your watch, Tony, continues.
Yeah.
Well, it was like 2/3 of the team one year.
Well, I think last year we had 8. I think you get Will Jordan back and David Havili. And remember, Sibi Reese he's a Mako man.
Yeah, although the Stags have claimed him now, haven't they?
Oh, yes.
He likes to move around.
You're with the Mako Rugby Roundup, and it's our great pleasure to welcome to the podcast Tony Lewis. And prior to joining Tasman in 2013, you'd worked in sport in Australia, notably the Australian cricket and the Randwick Rugby Club. And I've seen the Randwick ground. I think I've even watched a couple of matches there, actually. It's a great club, Randwick, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very, very famous club. I think they've had virtually every Australian, I think it's 85% Australian captain.
Wow.
World Cup winning coaches have all come from Randwick as well. So look, that's a famous club. I used to call it, it was more political than the Labor Party convention. You had every old boy down there every minute of the day, either in the bar, down in my office, you know, giving you exactly what should happen. So it was a fantastic 3 years. Loved every minute of it, and couldn't fault the time spent there. And I think the sad thing when I was there, we were always struggling to compete with Sydney University, and the number of scholarships they were able to give out. So my passing grace to the Randwick Rugby Club was the University of New South Wales became a major sponsor. We got no cash, but we got the same number of scholarships as Sydney. And we would have seen last year under Stephen Hall's Randwick Hall put that trophy up for the first time in about 15 years. So it was fantastic.
Yeah, right. You also had a role with Australia Cricket, so tell us about that.
Yeah, look, I was working at Christ College in Christchurch and got a call from a colleague that I've known in London saying that Australian cricket under the guise of New South Wales cricket wanted to set up a welfare model. And that stage, the player managers, the Players Association sort of got all the credit for what happened, you know, whether it was through education, whether it was through the Super Rugby scheme, looking after players. And Australian cricket felt that they had lost that where the players trusted them the most. So my idea, well, mine wasn't my idea. I was given a job description, and the role was to set up a welfare model for all Australian contracted cricketers in New South Wales, and male and female, and then the New South Wales contracted players. And if that deemed to be successful, to roll that out through the whole country. So it was a fantastic opportunity. I rocked into the Australian cricket group with under New South Wales, and Steve Rickson, the ex coach in New Zealand, was a coach.
Yeah.
And there in the team was Steve Orr, Mark Orr, Michael Slater, Mark Taylor was on the board. You had Michael Bevan, Glenn McGrath, Nathan Bracken, Stuart McGill. The list goes on and on and on. And they're the people you're working with day in, day out. So it was, and I'm a bit like Les. We're actually Australian cricket followers, and every year we will meet. If we're not in the same place, we'll phone each other up as we watch the first bowl of the Australian cricket summer. So it was just a joy. I had 7 years there, loved every minute of it. But in Australian cricket, it's very coach centric, and when we had a change of coaches, so we went from Steve Rickson to Trevor Bayliss, who was an incredible coach, and then he got the Sri Lankan job, and the new coach coming in really didn't see the player welfare model that well. But we changed. We went from in New South Wales, where hardly any players studied. Stuart Clark, the player, probably missed out. He came to me one day and said, I want to do a degree. I want to become a lawyer. And he left school at the end of year 10. So we did a whole list of things on him, put him into university. We did a macroeconomics, got an A, and he's a lawyer in Sydney, and the Greg Mail and a number of them that way. So it was very exciting. And to work with you go to work, and Mark Taylor would rock into the office, and you think, I used to love watching him play. Or the famous cricketers, Brian Tabo, those who know, is a fantastic wicket keeper through the 60s and 70s, and Bob Simpson would sit down and just shaking your head. So very privileged. Got me into, I was a teacher by name. Never really wanted to be a teacher, and I was climbing a ladder, and I knew I had to get out of it because I really struggled with teachers. Love the kids. They were fantastic, and it got me into sports administration, where I wanted to be, and that led to be head of high performance at New South Wales Cricket. And so it was just a pleasure. When I came back to New Zealand, Australian cricket and New Zealand cricket are so similar. It's unbelievable. The control that the states have over Australian cricket is similar to the provincial unions. And it's just an exciting place to work, and very, very aggressive in the market, which they have to be.
Yeah, right. Interesting. And you did come back to New Zealand, and you ended up taking a role with South Canterbury Rugby Union. So tell us about that role.
Yeah, I sort of had this idea of wanting to be a chief executive. So between cricket and rugby, I went and worked for a non-for-profit called Australian Diabetes, and they own 3 sporting events, corporate games and the 10K and the 6K. And that got me, as Les will say, that my best attribute was my ability to go through a P&L. And that sort of got my ability to look at P&Ls, what profit and loss looks like, how do you make a business work. So I was looking for an opportunity as a chief executive. And then I'm a mad keen skier, and this opportunity came up with South Canterbury Cricket and rugby combined. Sort of took a whopping pay cut, but we bought a house which was between Mount Harts and a number of ski fields, and it was a sort of a semi part-time role. So we thought this would be fantastic. We'll head down there and we'll do the right thing. Stephanie never ever got to live in South Canterbury. We arrived there. I was probably there for 6 weeks. Had a ball, but quickly realised the job wasn't for me.
Oh, right. So she never really even got on the plane.
Oh no, I don't think so. I think it was it just was going to be running a club rugby. Yeah, and let's not not disparaging now. Heartland is one of the best competitions running around in the world, but they are big clubs. More than running a community rugby program, as well as running a high performance program. So I was happy there, but when I say it wasn't for me, I quickly realised that once I got a phone call.
So that segues nicely to the fact that you had in 2011, when Peter Barazine applied for the CEO role, and then 18 months later, after Andrew Flexman, Bar's replacement, also resigned, you got a call And tell us about how that came about.
Yeah, well, the interesting one was the first apply. It was bizarre because Pete was on the interview panel. So, I made it clear when I resigned as chief executive to Wayne Young that I had no interest in being in any interview panel or being involved, and so that was bizarre. And I got a phone call and told you should throw your head in the ring here. Threw my head in the ring on a Friday. I think I was flown up on a Thursday. Had a chat with the probably 6 people in interview panel. Again, the chief executive was sitting in there, which I found incredibly bizarre. As I was walking down the stairs, Ken Beams put his arm around me and said, we wanted you here last time.
He did, yes.
Yeah. And because he was on the interview panel, and he said, there was 2 of us who wanted you and there's 2 that didn't. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. He said, when can you start? I said, well, you're interviewing other people. And he said, I'll come back to you. So I think it must have been a Thursday. He came back to me on the Friday and said, job's yours. I said, well, I've got a bit of a problem. I've taken this. So probably very unprofessionally, I just exited straight away from South Canterbury. I was asked on the Thursday by South Canterbury Cricket what was the biggest risk, and I said that South Canterbury Cricket didn't have any money. And I just thought it was a risk for the family. I had an opportunity with Tasman Rugby, which I'd applied for and was very passionate previously. Ken seemed like a good bloke. I only met him once and then on the phone. So that Saturday afternoon, I packed up my 3 suitcases and hired a rental car and drove through the Lewis Pass up to here.
Wow, how's that? You'd already started by then, hadn't you?
Yes.
So your first CEO was Andrew, is that correct?
No, Peter.
Oh, no, you
Barber
had
here,
a
then
session with
Andrew's
Peter,
left
right.
for 18 months,
Yeah.
and then Tony arrived. And Tony arrived on the eve of the ITM Championship final 2013 against Hawke's Bay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which was fortuitous because there was a bit of drama on match day, wasn't it, mate?
I think it was drama the whole week because I remember, I think we were playing Southland, and I do because I was straight away playing Southland and Blenheim in the semi-final, and unbeknown to most, I actually watched that game. I came up here, then drove over and watched the game over there. And as I was leaving the stadium, Ken said to me, just so you're aware, we have signed no players from this group for next year. And I said, right. He said, that's your first job on Monday. So that was the first job on Monday. And I think we signed 15 in that week. Shane Christie was the only one who refused to sign. He said, I want to see what everyone else is getting paid and I want the most, which is very unlike Shane. But so, yeah, it was a bizarre week trying to get into a job and make an impression with the staff because you get a short period of time, which I really couldn't do because I was locked away in a room, one by one, Kieran bringing up the players.
Yeah, right.
So Leon and Kieran had said, these are the 15 players that we want. Off you go and do your work. And then we're sitting in my office, Les and I, and the weather was sort of a bit nasty, and the New Zealand Rugby, obviously thinking that it was really important that they save some money, they decided to send the trophy over by ferry and the staff. So no, they were going to fly by plane. They couldn't get on the plane to land, so they come over by ferry. Then the ferry didn't arrive to just before kickoff, and we had to get over here. And I said to Les, we need a helicopter. And then Les will take over from here, and he quickly arranged a helicopter that picked the girls up off the boat and then brought them to the ground.
I do remember that.
Yeah, we had a sponsor called Helicopter New Zealand, HNZ, and the CEO was a guy I'd met called Keith Mullett.
Great guy.
And yeah, fabulous man. He's in Perth now. And he arranged a helicopter. They landed at Picton, picked up the trophy, the medals, and I think they arrived like 45 minutes before kickoff, and the weather was coming in. But it all cleared, didn't it?
Because it did clear.
The match day itself was stunning. Match night, I should say, and of course, history was made with the winning of the ITM Cup Championship. Your recollections of that game?
Yeah, so I really think that game clearly indicated the direction that the Tasman Rugby Union were going to go in regards to community rugby and high performance. Because I said to Kieran and Leon after the game, you never went to the bench. And KK said we couldn't. And my recollection there is as we got further in the lead and Hawke's Bay started chucking players on, we kept with the same players. And I think Billy Guyton was the only one to get subbed near the end.
Paul came on and
saved the match.
Saved the match,
Yeah.
didn't he? Yeah.
He pushed the guy out wide. So I think what that game showed me was that we had, exceptional talent. I mean, I think we at that stage had 4 super players. By the end of the year, we had 9 or 10. And I think the talent coming through, and we quickly signed them up, but it put a marker in the sand, was that we need to look at our club competition, our community rugby, and align them, because if they're not aligned, they won't work. And you can't say you're going to put all your effort into community rugby. You've got to align both. And I think, to me, when I look at that game and I watch that game, and the first recollection is Marty Banks putting his arm up when he's running down the full length of field to score. And my other two recollections is, I don't know who the person was, but smashing the hoardings as a young Isaiah. Was it Isaiah, the young 5'8" from was
Ohio West.
Ohio West.
It was the Hammerheads.
The Hammerheads.
Had raced down to the corner where he was kicking and made a hell of a round.
I remember that.
Right on the 22. And then my third recollection was, I just moved there and I was staying in a Little India, above Little India. There's an apartment up there, and I'd rented that. And I got up in the morning about 6 o'clock to go for a walk, and I saw a number of the players either leaving hotels or standing in the corner drinking, and I thought, oh, I wonder what's happening on Mad Saturday.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
we'll gloss over that. But then you, of course, did get a lot of them re-signed.
Yeah, that's right. And you're able to also bring in some new blood, notably a guy called Alex Nankerville.
Yeah.
He went on to have a stellar career. So how did you come across Alex and convince him to come to here?
No one really likes to correct it, but we didn't actually go after Alex until 2016.
Oh.
So in 2014, the conversation was we had to increase the standard of club rugby, and what could we do there, and we had to align it. So in that particular time, I think what we did in regards to recruitment, we signed Ross Gildenhouse, Pete Samu, David Havili as well. He wasn't signed to anything.
Wow.
And Jimmy Cowan, who, when you ask later, who was important people.
Yeah.
Those three, and we list out a very good Marist halfback who was the player of the year. And I got the short straw. Leon and KK wouldn't speak to him. I'd speak to him and tell him that we were going to sign Jimmy. But also from club rugby, there's a girl called Ben Tyler, Weeks, Lepper, Jesse McDonald, and Ruben Northover. They all came through that club rugby, and the idea was we started to bring people in to play club rugby and bring that strength up, and that's what we did. And so that sort of led to 2015, where we went even further, where a Kane Hames came and a Mako Corsia, and that's where Alex Nankerville sort of fell onto the scene. And that started in 2014 when Leon McDonald and I went down to Christchurch to speak to RJ Smith, who was the head of the Crusaders, professional development, high performance. He did all the recruitment for Canterbury, all the recruitment for the Crusaders, and ran their high performance program. Leon and I had a meeting. I won't use the adjective that Leon did as we left that meeting, but it was a catalyst to change things, where we went to the meeting and we got nowhere. And he said words to effect, it's just like the Steve Lancaster era. We're going to get no help from the Crusaders, no help from Canterbury. So the next day I went to watch a club game, and I was standing there, and Razor come over to me, and Scott Robinson, as I prefer to call him, said to me, "What are you doing here? Keep away from my players." And I'd watched Christchurch boys play earlier in the day, and the best player in the region was Alex Nankerville. So I went, "Bugger you guys, if you're not going to help us, I'm going to take your best player." And so we went after Alex quite well. At that time, we had lost to Fur, Hunt, Drummond, Molly, and Hill and Marshall, to other areas. Every one of those come back to us except Mitch Hunt and Mitch Drummond, which I think is his biggest regret would be not coming back to play for us, because that gave Finlay Christie that opportunity.
Yeah,
but because of Razor and the Crusaders, that gave us the opportunity to get Alex. We sold him the dream. He wanted to be a chief. He didn't want to be a Crusader. And he came in here and he hit the ground running. So the first year he really only trained with the squad. And then from then on he started playing, and it started the ball rolling. And it was a catalyst to me to draw up a paper. And I think if I had to say the best thing I did for club rugby, and it was the fact that we set up the Crusader Academy, convinced the Canterbury to give up the best academy program in the world, and Mixer was one. And then we started to get incredible quality of players coming to the region, who propped up, made clubs stronger, and that happened in Melbourne and Berlin. So Alex Nankivell, I taught with his father at Christ College. His father and Alex wanted love. I think we gave him some love. He lived with Steph and I for the first three months, and we went from there. And I think he epitomises the new breed of Mako men. He brought up the old school, but he's also got that little bit of funk about him.
Yeah, I often, when I turn on Sky Sport now, I see Munster. So I often now try and spot him in the team. So great to see him there. Making the NBC Premiership final in the first year after promotion gave the fans a real buzz. And other than Taranaki winning in front of 21,000 at Yarrow Stadium, what were the recollections of that match?
Well, the first one's the poor behaviour of Les and Peter, who both sulked and stormed back to the hotel after the game. But I think the recollections were
got on it, mate. Is another way of putting it.
Yeah, I think the recollections was the ability of Kieran and Leon to go to the bench. We actually got smacked around in the first 20, 30 minutes, and then I think we dominated the rest of the game. We scored more tries. Glenn Jackson did definitely come off my Christmas card list. I think he gave them 6 penalties. So my recollection was the standard of club rugby that year gave Kieran and Leon the opportunity to have a much stronger team and put out a team that could compete not only nationally in a grand final, but through the whole season. And so my recollection of that, it was the hard work that had gone on through that thing, through that season. The other thing we also did was we made KK not live in Nelson. So previous chief executive had him having him living in Nelson. We put him back and made him the face of Blenheim Rugby. It gave Blenheim and Melbourne a real focal point to hone in on. And then he and Leon, they would go to clubs. They wouldn't have and on a Monday and Wednesday night, you come into us, they would go to the clubs and they would work with Pete Samu, who maybe had a problem over the ball, and they would go to the club and help the clubs out and work with them. And I think getting the coaches and the clubs, and then Andrew Goodman took that to the next level. So that's what I remember. And a chartered plane, probably unheard of in New Zealand provincial rugby, that a union would charter a plane, and you probably could have filled two.
We got a supporters plane and the team plane. So yeah, my recollection is being one of 500 Mako fans and surrounded by 3,500, enough to give you the willies, mate, and leave after the loss.
Well, then, of course, the Mako also reached the 2016 and 17 Premier finals, both times against Canterbury and Richie Mo'unga. So despite 3 finals losses, did you think that there was a premiership win in the horizon?
Interspersed in that is also a semi-final loss to Canterbury out here, where Mitch Drummond had, he was player of the day and got himself an All Black jersey on the back of that. So I always believed we had the players. I always believed we had the coaching group. It just took someone to do something a little bit different, and we were probably going along the same lines the whole time. And Leon McDonald done a magnificent job to get the team to that far. And no doubt some of the things we put in practice before we worked hard for him to get the Blues role, that he would have made those changes for us to come through and win. But I think it was a combination over a long time, a group of young guys coming through. And in 2019, 2020, we sort of got that mixture 100% right, but we made a couple of fundamental changes. That being said, I don't think any team would have beaten Canterbury on those 2 days with Richie playing. So if you swap the 2 5/8s around, I know they Canterbury, for example, when Scott Robinson was coaching, they ran everything through their first 5/8. Through our first 5/8, they believe points came that way. And I think if you swap Banksy and Richie over, we win both of those games. And that's not saying Marty Banks wasn't a great player. That Richie is one of the greatest players.
He skinned us both games.
Yeah,
He really was just, and that's when we saw why he became one of the best first fives in the world. He was outstanding.
Yeah, and I think the sad thing about Richie is that he needed a coach who loved him. And I'm not sure Ian Foster loved him like he needed to. Even in the final last year, he took him off with 15 minutes to go. And I think, I remember in 2015, we chased Richie really, really hard. They had Dan Carter, Blundell, Taylor, Colin Slade down there, and he was the fifth 5'8". We chased him really hard. And it was another catalyst for us to put our hands up and say, right, we need to change things. So he won those 2 games. He was magnificent. And in every part of the game, whether it was his goal kicking, team around the pitch, he scored 3 tries in those 2 games as well. So super player. It'd be great when he's back next year playing for the All Blacks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So interspersed between those losses and finally getting the victory, which we'll talk about, in between that, our region hosted the first ever All Black Test in Nelson in 2008. And I know from first-hand experience that was your idea. What was the catalyst behind your thinking our small union could host a test match, and not just any old test match, but an All Black test match?
Yeah, it's a tier 1 test. So that's for me is the big one. So what was the catalyst? I was actually lying on a beach in Fiji reading a book called Mike Tyson's authorised biography, which he had written and wasn't ghost written. He'd written the whole thing, then someone obviously come through and correct the punctuation and spelling, as you would expect. And he said that his biggest problem when he won the world title fight was they taught him to get his hands up, elbows in, be more scientific as a boxer. Then he realised he had a glass jaw, and he was concentrating on that so much. Every time he got hit in the jaw, he didn't win a game. He didn't win a fight since then. And he said, don't concentrate on the little stuff, just go for the big stuff. So I arrived back and I had mapped out 10 rounds of boxing, the things that
15, mate.
No, it was 10.
Was it?
No, sorry, it was wrong. You did right. It was 12.
No one likes to correct the Les.
No, we don't.
Who started it?
So there was 12 rounds of boxing, and had mapped out all these things that we wanted to achieve, whether it was playing numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I'd got to 10 rounds. And as I was about to present this to the senior management group of the union, I got an email from New Zealand Rugby, and they just, but begrudgingly must send it to all the provincial unions. Would you like to host an All Black Test? There's a process, da. And basically, that it's Napier, New Plymouth, Waikato, Auckland, Canterbury Route, and Dunedin. So I picked up the phone to Nigel Cass and I said to Nigel, just reading your thing about holding a test match. In 2015, we had 16,000 people, I think the number was, come to the game at Trafalgar Park. The Crusaders played the Hurricanes. So we can do this. And he giggled down the phone. And that was the catalyst. So catalyst 1 was that. And it was after the reading the autobiography. Catalyst 2 was him giggling down the phone. On the back of that, I did a whole lot of phoning around, found out how much they made for a test match in Auckland, then prepared went back to him the next day and said to him, you make this in a test match in Auckland, you make this in a test match in Wellington, reeled off the figures. He said, where you've got those from? And I pitched a figure of 1.2 million, guaranteed. Whether just me and one other person went to the game, we'd guarantee them 1.2 million. And I hadn't got even the money by that stage. And I said, but the opportunity is if we go down this pathway, you'll get 1.6 and plus. So anyway, he said, well, put it on paper. And they asked me how many covered seats. Grab, please. How many covered seats we got?
1,700.
How many corporate boxes? None. You got a media centre? No. So anyway, that's how we started. And then off we went from there. Then the next day I rang Shane Drummond up and said to him, this is my idea. What do you think? And he says, great. I said, right, I need 1.2 million.
Well, you're underwrite.
No, I didn't go that far. I said, I need 1.22 million. He looked at me and he said, will you work with the council? So I worked away with them. And then I said, Shane, you've got to come back to me within 24 hours. I said, I know there's 3 people I can go to who would underwrite it, but I'm giving you first dibs. And he went away. He was back within 12 hours. He had I won't real
Paul Jensen,
Paul Jensen
and
Mike Fraser and himself. They underwrote it 300,000, and then I got the other 300,000 from other means. Put a proposal to the rugby union. They will guarantee them 1.2 million.
Jeez, yeah, I think Shane talked about selling the tickets. He's sweating, going, "Let's get these tickets sold."
He wasn't selling them, but he was sweating.
I think the key was, from our perspective, is that once we had, I think it was 14,000 tickets sold, they were in the clear.
Yeah,
so I mean,
yeah,
it was never
yeah.
it was never ever going to be a worry. But the key for us is that.
All the rest of the money you promised New Zealand Rugby meant that it was the last 2,000 tickets that was the cream for us.
I think the big cream for us was on a number of factors. I did an incredible in the 2011 Rugby World Cup. The staff at Nelson City Council had and Chris, I can't remember Chris's last name, from the Nelson City Council. He was a number 2 there, and he said they had spent $3 or $4 million staff time trying to do that. They wanted nothing to do with it. So on the back of that, they guaranteed us the ground, basically free of charge. We didn't take a management fee from New Zealand Rugby because I now own the ground. I got porridge rights. So where we made our money was porridge rights.
Right. And it could have been so much more money if it hadn't been a freezing night, but we'll get to there. So the week leading into the test itself, Tony, was fantastic, as you well remember. Sunshine, the All Blacks arrived on the Sunday, and on the Wednesday, the test match had sold out, 21,400 tickets sold. So did you have the opportunity to soak it all in?
Yeah, I did have the opportunity to soak it in. Soaked it in throughout the week. Les and I had made a sort of an agreement with each other that our biggest worry was no one there for the kickoff or the haka.
Try and get them off,
because
get them out of the streets.
Because infamous that the Nelson crowds arrived late. I think 20 minutes before kickoff or 30 minutes before kickoff, the stands are chocker, and it was absolutely brilliant. So we said we'd have a lovely bottle of Central Otago Pinot just before kickoff. So that was the first thing. The second thing I did was from basically 10 o'clock to about 2 o'clock that day, I immersed myself in all the pubs around the town, all the restaurants, etc., and it was fantastic to see places like the Vic Brew Bar run out of beer.
So many places run out of beer.
So from my perspective, able to enjoy that. But I suppose in that week, I think it was a test match, and Tony Johnson on his broadcast said it was the greatest test match he'd been to in New Zealand since the 2011 World Cup, and maybe the greatest of all time. It was because it's probably the only test where you could be in the centre of town and walk to the ground.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And which everyone did.
Yeah.
It was the only test where the only in town to be the test match. So many people come from outside of town. But the All Blacks were staying at the Rutherford, and they would just walk to training, and they would walk home. And so they were everywhere.
At first, they had a bus. Right, they had a bus to take them from the Rutherford to Trafalgar Park, and then they quickly realised that it was a hop, skip, and a jump. Yeah. So they would walk, and they would enjoy the cafes, and the public were amazing because they didn't pester them. That allowed them to have their coffee and whatnot. Of course, said hello and got an autograph occasionally, but they had the time of their lives just being able to walk to training and that.
And it's the first time they've ever in All Black history, the whole week they were here, train on number 1. So when they first got here, they were going to go train somewhere else, and Steve Hansen sort of, and his little voice that he does, comes up and says, "Oh, I don't want to train anywhere else." So we quickly changed things. You can train here the whole time. And then the players started walking. And I think the greatest thing was how the town embraced them, the number of visitors who came here. I remember dropping someone off the airport on the Sunday, and this guy walked up to me. He said, "Are you Tony Lewis? I want to thank you. All I do is travel the world watching international sport. Best event I've been to." So that was all the cool stuff that went down.
Yeah.
My biggest worry for the whole week was we were always going to have a terrace, and I think it's 6 weeks before the test, I'm standing there with Greg, who was Heron, who was in charge of building the ground, and he goes, "This terrace, what do you think?" So we started talking, and I went, "Bugger it. let's put the next stand up, and probably maybe 10 weeks, 12 weeks. So suddenly we had, and I based it around, I'm a Mad King soccer player, but the QPR, if you've been to Queen's Park Rangers in Shepherd's Bush, it was basically a ground like that where you're on top of each other, and people who speak to today say they're at the ground and they could hear the line out calls, they could hear the thumps.
Yeah.
So the whole town embraced. My biggest worry was, the ground not getting health and safety inspection. But I suppose the other thing to tick off was the first time the Nelson City Council and the Tasman District Council, they both contributed money to Tasman Rugby Union for us to pull it off, as long as their staff didn't do any work. And their staff did great stuff by having buses and things like that to run. But I think we had an absolute community feel about everything. On top of that, the way the staff at Tasman Rugby Union embraced it.
Yeah, fantastic. It's a great occasion, a good night out, that's for sure.
Yeah, and we won't dwell on it, but there was some coin for the TRU which helped, and
look, from the simple thing, I'm happy to tell the figures. That 1.6 million plus made by New Zealand Rugby, that's up there with a Wellington Test match, miles more than the other grounds by Eden Park. So they normally make about 3. So at that time, 1.6 plus. We made 500,000 on the selling of alcohol and a few other things. Like the only way you could buy a ticket was become a member. Les worked his hard off there. But the same token is the staff embraced it, and the high performance staff in particular. They didn't train here for the week. They had to go away and play somewhere else that week. So that was fantastic. But I had 2 soldiers on a daily basis, close to a year, Les and myself for a year, and then Steve Mitchell for the last 6 months. His job was as the operations person. Those people know Steve Emmanuel come this big. He weaned it down to Emmanuel, which was about this big, and he did a great job. And we not only did we learn from what we were doing ourselves, but we went down to the Dunedin test. Les worked at that test, so did Steve. So I think, from my perspective, I'll be internally grateful to those two, but also the staff. To a mad idea of the many that sort of come out of my head was, we can do this. I think the sad thing is we've never taken that further. And the time we've been here, there's those opportunities. It's probably gone now. We'll probably never ever have another test match here. And then so it was that opportunity for us to push for things that maybe, an East Stand, et cetera, which we haven't done, which is a shame.
No, that's true. So it's 2019 and you have the coaches and players ready to give the title a real crack. Talk to us about the squad of coaches and players and where you had recruited to give the team every chance of winning that premiership.
I think it goes back to 2018. We lost a semi-final out here in 2018 to Canterbury. I think I said 2015, 2019 before, but it was 2018, and Canterbury absolutely walloped us. And 2 things reminded me at the end of during the game is we were hanging in there, and Mitchell Drummond had the game of his life. Probably has never played a better game. And he even apologised after the game. Sorry, Tony, I didn't mean to. But what came out of that, the coaches and the players are on completely different planes. So in the reviews, the coaches would say the players weren't mentally tough enough. In the players' reviews, the players would say the coaches aren't preparing us mentally. Now, somewhere in between the truth was being. And I think Leon did such a good job to open up and listen to that feedback. He just never got the chance to put into play. So going into the 2019 season, Andrew Goodman, before he left to go to the Crusaders, he was left in no doubt from me that we had a massive problem in mental hardness, and that was borne out by the players and the coaches. Both disagreed that they were wrong. Players thought they were mentally tough. The coaches thought they'd done all the hard work and that the players were. So we sort of, Andrew sort of left me with a challenge: find someone. And I was quite keen in psychology. You can always find someone in that mental space that will tell you you've got some mental health problems. They're all everywhere, and here's a couple of pills to help you out. So my thought process were we needed to get an educational psychologist, someone who can educate the players, can teach the players, and we kept on coming back to one guy all the time, and he was working within the academy. And there's no doubt, and Wyatt Crockett he said to me at the end of the 2019 season, that man,
Shane Winterton.
yeah, so it was Shane Winterton. I was getting there. So it was Shane. He said Shane Winterton is the best mental skills coach I've used. He changed the way, because he's an educational psychologist. He changed the way we think. And if I could give Steve anything, I'd get that man back into our place as quick as we can, because he's exceptional. He's one of the best I've ever met, and he changed it. But the little things that happen, like so, and Alex Nankerville doesn't believe in it whatsoever. Tim and O'Malley thought it's an absolute load of rubbish. Halfway through the season, they're telling me this guy's changing the way I behave in the flat. So from my perspective, that was the big one. From also when I was doing a few notes last night, is that 15 starters in the 2019 all had their first game of rugby for the Mako. So of the 15 starters, 5 out of the reserves had come from clubs. The 15 starters were playing Super or there. The following year, 13 starters came from the year before. So we had them back. Sorry, so 13 starters had played their first game, but only 6 from 219 to 220 started the game. But 19 come from the club rugby over those 2 years. Goes back to my comment at the start. Unless you aligned high performance and the strength of your club rugby competition, we had 11 club teams then. You're not going to achieve. And I always look at that game, the 2019-2020. We were always going to win the 2019. If we lost it, it was just through poor coaching, poor players, and we stuffed it up. But that group under Clark and obviously Andrew Goodman, there's only 6 players who started playing in 220, and the work that Andrew Goodman made sure was happening in those club players just brought them through. And you can go through the 220 team, and the front rowers in the tight heads was Isaac Salmon and Sam Martinger, and they're just club journeymen. They're not super players. And so what I see is that a lot of work taking place, and also a lot of work that Chris at Goodman had done through the academy. Those players populated club rugby, and they populated those teams. So when you've got 15 starters and 13 starters have had their first class game of rugby at the Mako, it says something about the place.
Yeah, and geez, what an amazing record for Andrew Goodman to come in, going the season undefeated. I mean, that's just incredible.
And Clark. So
true.
So an interesting thing is when Leon was going, I was Les and I went to Melbourne with Leon, and it was clear as the sun rises and sets when we looked at the Rebels at that stage. They should have been chucked out then, Les.
Definitely.
Their coaches were going around Leon trying to get him to say. Then Leon went up to the Waratahs, and the Waratahs virtually were going to offer him the head coaching role. Right. I flew up to Steve Chu and said, mate, this is the best young coach I've seen. I still maintain to this day, best young coach I've ever seen is an attack coach. He's going to go to the Waratahs. And Steve Chu said, we're going to lose him. They've got some good players. So on the back of that, he went and we sat down. Who's going to replace him? Andrew Goodman didn't want to do it. Clark Dermy didn't want to do it. And we sat there and we looked at each other and we ran it through Crockett, Strange, Mitch Hunt, David Havili, and one other, Quinton Strange, and Blackadder. What about co-coaches? And they all looked at us. Who? Told them. Perfect. And one's weakness was the other person's strength, one's strength was the other one, and they were complementing each other absolutely perfectly. And I was used to Leon and KK walking in my office with a smile, and you knew they wanted someone. Those two walked in and it was like poker face. You didn't know where you're going to go with them. So very, very, very fortunate. But a lot of hard work had been done by a lot of players, Jimmy Holden, Chris Goodman, and all those coaches before we got to that stage.
And it was a pretty good day in Nelson, wasn't it? So, you can go the whole season. There's plenty of times where people have gone the whole season undefeated and then you tip up in the final or the semi. It was close in Blenheim, but...
it was actually close in the final.
Yeah.
It was really, really close. And a couple of people will forget that Will Jordan tracked back 80.
Correctly.
Yeah. And tracked back, nailed him in a tackle, which virtually was just saving the game because there was 7 points he scores. We go the other end and it scores 7. Yeah. And I think that's a crucial one. And there's a great last 10 minutes of the game where he does track back, he makes the tackle, and he made a number of those tackles for the game, but he's lying on the ground just watching what's going on. The ball goes to Alex Nankervis, makes a break, and this is where Will Jordan is completely different to any other footballer in the world. Most of us who's made that tackle would lay there and go, how good are we? He jumps to his feet, runs straight through the Wellington ruck. Nankervis passes to him, and he runs and scores the try.
Marco, work great.
Yeah. Work great.
Yeah,
That's right.
dead right.
There's the call.
So 2020 was completely different.
Yeah.
2019 was a coronation, really, of a spectacular season. Thank you, Corey Eggers, for your TMO work up in Blenheim in the semi-final to get us into the final. But
I think it was out.
It was a coronation in a way. If we don't win that one, we're never going to win. So 2020 was completely different. The Mako had their fair share of regular season losses, including getting smashed by Auckland up at Eden Park in the regular season. But made the semis, beat Bay of Plenty, and then go up to Auckland, right, to take on Auckland again in the final. So my question is, at what point during that day did you sense that the Mako would go back-to-back NPC champions?
Yeah. So just add something. We're also in between that won the National Sevens. So we're the only provincial union to have both trophies. On that day, when Mitchell Hunt got knocked out senseless, in today's game, that person who knocked him out senseless, he's red carded and gone. He didn't get anything happening to him. So that was a really good thing for the team to happen, because that meant that David Havili played first 5'8" and fullback and took over the goal kicking as well.
He did everything.
And he did everything. And our best player, a bit like in the Wellington game the year before, our best player was definitely Will Jordan. Under extreme leadership from David, but our best player and the best player of the NPC that season was David Havili. He was the best coach, the best captain, the best everything. And that particular day, I remember when Tim O'Malley went on, and Tim is the heart and soul of the team. He'd be the first to admit the ability to lead a team to a grand final win for 75 minutes is not in his repertoire. He is a key player in the Mako group and always has been. He sort of floated between second 5'8", fullback to the wing as David played first 5'8", played fullback, controlled the game. And I think you just could see that was happening. You also had people who were probably playing their last real game for the Mako and wanting to play to the best they could possibly play. And I go back to people like Finlay Christie. He probably hasn't played a game since, or he's played the odd game, but that was his song grace that he was going to take it to the next level. Leicester was another one. So there's a number of those group of people. Also, people forget that, and I always say this, and I've said to every coach, the best coaches are the best selectors. And I will go back to when Richie made a four of us, and Leon McDonald chose Alex Ainsley ahead of Parry Parkinson, which was a massive mistake, and Don Bird dominated, and this is nothing to Alex. If they flipped it around and Parkinson and started and Alex had come on, it would have been better for the team. In this particular game, a lot of people will probably forget about this, but Isaac Ross was selected ahead of Alex Ainsley in the reserves. And the idea was that we wanted someone when it got tough and needed someone who was experienced, but you could guarantee the line-out ball. When you're 6'7", you guarantee the line-out ball. So that selection was huge. Just before the end of the warm-up, Isaac Ross said something to Andrew Goodman, and Andrew Goodman turned around to him and said, "See that guy over there?" And that was Alex Ainsley. "Don't make me regret it." So not only good selection, but those are the things. And probably the other thing is that Auckland thought they had it won.
Well, yeah,
we've heard that from Shane Christie.
Yeah, that's right. And I couldn't remember whether it was Quinton McDonald. I think there was a couple of players that said, it might have been Quinton that told the story about walking past. He just happened to be walking past the Auckland Circle, and there was a couple of comments, and they were sort of having a giggle and a bit of a laugh, and they were all quite relaxed. And Quinton got his goat up and went back to the group and said, "Those guys think they've got it won."
Yeah. Well, we went to this is the bizarre thing about sport these days. On the Friday night, New Zealand played Sri Lanka in a game of cricket on Eden Park. And we went there as guests, Wayne Young and I, of guests of the Auckland Rugby Union. The trophy was polished, it was put in there, it even had the name tag on it. It was just ridiculous.
Fantastic.
Never count your chickens before they hatch.
And I think that game epitomised 8 years of hard work in the clubs, and then obviously in the Mako team. And I always remember when I first got here, after about a year, Fraser Lockhead and Charlie Taylor, we had a meeting and with all the clubs that are in there, and they walked up to me afterwards. They said, "We just run rings around the Tasman Rugby Union. They just do as we say. We have to get on the horse. We're so far behind and to jump on." I think we had the clubs, we had the coaches, we had the players, and more importantly, we weren't losing anyone. As I said before, if we lost them, we brought them back, and Mitch Drummond was the only one I couldn't bring back. But they wanted to do it for the region, and the region was both sides of the hill.
Yeah, which is important too, isn't it? So 2021, you go out a winner and take up the role as Western Force CEO in Perth. So what was the motivation behind taking on that challenge?
It's an interesting one because I wasn't looking for a job. I was happily here. But in the back of my head, I was thinking 8 years, chief executive, is that the right thing? Should you move on? So I was starting to think what was happening. I got a phone call from someone who said, "Oh, the force would like to speak to you." And so I kept everything close to my chest. I told Les about a month after we'd been going down this process. And I told the chairman at the time. Other than that, I told no one. I didn't tell Steph for 3 weeks. I was just working my way through what it looked like. And I'd worked in Australian rugby before, and I'd promised myself I'd never go back because it's a basket case. And I decided after a long time, and speaking to Andrew Forrest and others, and probably more importantly, thinking 8 years is a long time as a chief executive. Time to let someone else have a go. Why not? And it was probably their only opportunity. We knew that we wanted Olivia to go to high school here. So we had a 3-year window, maybe 4, but definitely 3-year window where we could go. So the opportunity came up. Andrew had a dream. But all good things come to an end with Tasman. Wonderful staff, had a fantastic senior management team, had a board to die for. Ken Beams was outstanding. Wayne was good, but we had people who had skills, and they complement each other. We had no one dominating the board. No one. This would be an interesting thing people don't know about. We never ever had a vote on the board. We never had an argument. We would do all those sort of things. We'd come to a resolution, and it was always agreed to, and consensus. No one, well, let's vote. So I was very fortunate in that time to really work with a group of people who wanted to make the union great. I think when I got here, the strategic plan was to be a good provincial union. I hate that word. It's like nice. He's a nice bloke. Okay, well, it's a nice person. We sat down there, and the staff and the clubs, they developed a strategic plan. It wasn't from a board. I think a board develops a strategic plan. It's doomed for failure because no one's buying in. So it was done from the bottom up. And that was to be a top 4 provincial union under any criteria. So it could be sponsorship. It could be number of people opening a Facebook page, a newsletter. It could be performances, number of All Blacks, et cetera, et cetera. And we held each other to account to that. So the opportunity for something different, somewhere new, somewhere thing. That's why I went.
So tell us about some of the highlights there. I mean, it was 3 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 3 years.
Yeah.
I suppose the highlight was, first highlight was we got $1 million worth of funding from Australian Rugby, and all the others got 5.4. So the first highlight was getting that to 5.4, only to have it taken away last year. Which was a bit of a shame because there's absolutely no money. They get $29 million a year broadcast rights. So the highlights was probably the force being a leader in Australian rugby. We were driving. We had the biggest sponsorship portfolio. We had 1.1 million when I got there. We were 5.8 when I left. We had a guy called Hugh Locke, who I say there's 2 sponsorship managers on the golf course and in the job that they do that I really enjoy. And Hugh and Les, they're exactly the same. Les has probably got a better way of making sure everyone's happy as a good gatekeeper. Hugh's on to the next one. So that was a highlight. We had a very, very, very poor high performance team. So I think we got one of the best high performance teams in Super Rugby now. Front office is outstanding. So all those things, they've got the building blocks. The biggest problem the Force will always have, and I know that you've lived over there, is that the club competition is so poor that it's the best club rugby competition to go and watch on a Saturday because you have a whale of a time.
Yeah.
And the sun's out, the guns are out, you're overlooking the ocean, and you just have a good time. But the quality of rugby is so poor. So we are not going to grow our players through our club competition, and that we put a lot of money into it. I'm not sure if it's money well spent. And then the players over in the Eastern Seaboard, you're only picking up the third and fourth and fifth player. You're not picking up the star. So I think that was a frustrating thing. And then the overs, you're having to pay them to get them there is just a difficult. So lots of highlights, high performance staff, the sponsorship, the solvency, projections that we were trying to achieve. So it was good fun.
Good crowd, home crowds too. I mean,
Dropped to 4,000 this year.
oh, did it really?
Yeah.
Because when it was first launched, and it was competitions about the name of it and logo competitions through radio. I mean, the whole of Perth really bought into it. And then when it was launched, you bought these family packs, and they all arrived and took the kids there, and you were getting crowds of 35,000 people. They really backed it in that first start.
In my first year there, we're getting average crowds of 15,000, 14,000 first 2 years. And then it's dropped a bit the third year, probably down to 10, 11. And then this year they're averaging about 4.5.
Yeah, wow.
And it's a crying shame. And from what I hear, the Perth Bears look like they're heading there, and it'll be a real death knock for rugby, I think.
Yeah, right. So what do you think? I mean, Australian rugby, they certainly performed better. They probably dropped off towards the end. The Brumbies were there in the semis. The Force had some good home wins, but I won't say what has Australia rugby got to do. What has the Force got to do? I mean,
I think it's Australian rugby. What Australian rugby's got to do. I think from a Force perspective is we've got to have the academy that is so good that attracts those kids out of school that want to get here, and that's what we had here in Tasman. And so kids want to see an academy that's the best. They want to see an opportunity and a pathway, and then they want quality of coaching. Okay, those are the key things, and I think at the Force we've got those. At Australian rugby they don't have them. Okay, and it's always patching over everything, and there's no money. They also, when you're chasing a really, really good player, so there's a guy called Lockie Elias who plays for South Sydney, just broke his leg recently, playing against the Warriors. He played rugby league with my son and rugby union with my son in the same team, and he was an exceptional rugby player. Rugby offered him $5,000 contract. League offered him 80,000. So that's the problem, and that's where they're always going to be. They're never attracting the talent, and the money is so poor from the TV right. They don't have the money to invest to pick up the new coaches. Now they've got a very, very good model in Queensland, a very, very good model in Brumbies. But New South Wales needs to get its act together. That's the Auckland, but you remember they've got two excellent AFL teams, two excellent cricket teams. Then they've got New South Wales cricket, and then on top of that they've got 8. But you've also got Canberra and Newcastle, so 10 NRL teams, all chasing the schoolboy talent. So it's a very difficult situation. But I think the Force's biggest issue is getting that recruitment right and recruiting. If I had my time again, I'd put my foot down more on our recruitment. And at Force here, at the Mako here, no one was recruited going through our group. We had a recruitment group that was very good. We had Wayne Young, who sat on holding us to account on budgets, not really entering, but we had the coaches and myself, where we worked to a budget and we kept to a budget and we didn't panic. Over there, we really do overspend. And sometimes because we don't get the best talent, we have to recruit in NZ, and you're only getting an old person and you're paying overs. And you'd be staggered some of the money the Force have to pay overs for players.
Big job.
Big job. You're a good recruiter though, mate. So hands-on in that area would have served them well. I'm going to finish up with some quick questions for you, mate.
Yep.
So best coach and why?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask me this one. So I've got a number of, so I think coaches suit eras. So I'm going to, best coach who ever come across was Trevor Bayliss. He went on, he won, he coached Sri Lanka, he coached England.
I was talking Tasman Mako.
Yeah, no. So he's the best coach I've ever come across. His ability to, he won the Ashes, he won the rugby, he won the Cricket World Cup, beat New Zealand on the overthrow. And his ability to connect the team and technically. So he's one of the best coaches. In Tasman Mako, I think KK was perfect for his time. And without him, we would never have achieved where we were going to get to. When he wanted to come back, it wasn't the right time for him to come back. I think Leon took it to an area of holistic where we needed to get to in regards to talent, how to combine the clubs to work with the whole group, etc., etc. And then Andrew Goodman and Clark, they opened their eyes up to the different parts of rugby. I always believe that when you go to the academy, everyone arrives in at 90 out of 100 because they're good, okay? And the ones who aren't 90 are gone quite quickly. It's the ability to put that extra 10 on, and that was Clark and Clark and Andrew. They were able to put those extra 1%ers on all the way through. So I think in the Mako era that I was involved in, I don't think Clark and Andrew would have had the success that KK had. And I'm sure KK wouldn't have had the success that they had. And I think Leon is exactly the same. So I think they actually were a group. And I look at the Tasman group is that what I'm proud of the most is that all those coaches have come into our system. We've either homegrown them or we've taken them to the next level. And I think that's the key in what we've done.
I think each coaching group has left the Mako in better shape than and they passed it on. They've left it better than when they took it over and they passed it on. And each coaching group has grown the Mako, as you say. So best player you recruited, and this will be pretty obvious, I think.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So I reckon it's less obvious, and I reckon you get it wrong.
Okay.
So if you're going talent, you're going to go Will Jordan, Ethan Blackadder, you're going to go Tyrell Lomax, the list goes on and on, Alex Nankerville, et cetera, Finlay Christie. But the two players that took the Mako to the next level is Jimmy Cowan and Wyatt Crockett. If those two had not come to the region, we would not have won 2 titles. So Jimmy Cowan, his recruitment taught mental hardness from a player's perspective. We'll all remember his first game he played against Mitchell Drummond out here. Mitch Drummond's putting the ball on defence. Jimmy Cowan's got no interest where the ball's going. He's just jumping on Mitch Drummond's foot. And he was just mentally so tough. And he gave us something for 2 years that we didn't have. And then Wyatt Crockett come into our group, and what he gave the group was this ability that you can be a bloody good bloke and an exceptional rugby player, but also he trained so professionally and so hard. So those two, from my perspective, which I think probably surprises you, they were absolute game changers on us moving to the next level.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, excellent. Lansdowne Park or Trafalgar Park?
Yeah, that's a good one. So
we do broadcast into Marlborough, by the way.
That's why I'm asking it.
I have no problem answering that one. So, and before the drainage was fixed up at Trafalgar Park, Lansdowne was by far a bit better pitch, and then Trafalgar Park became a great pitch then afterwards. And then obviously Trafalgar Lansdowne's now been improved, so they're quite equal. I look at it a slightly different way. If you're playing on a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon, the best ground to make money is Trafalgar Park. If you're playing on a Friday night, the best ground and the best atmosphere to make money is Lansdowne, because at Lansdowne on a Friday night, most of the blokes don't come with their kids, and they have a hell of a lot of drinks. I've actually run out of alcohol in the game at Lansdowne Park. I think they're great. Their supporters are great. As an ex-Otago rugby player, we used to always play Marlborough, so we love coming and playing Marlborough. Never played here. I sometimes think Les and I created a rugby ground more than it being a rugby ground. We used to hire those stands until we convinced the council to buy them. So both fantastic grounds. I think they're probably two best provincial grounds in New Zealand that the opposition don't really like coming to.
Yeah, that is the correct answer. They are both wonderful venues for our region. Best club to mix and mingle at?
Yeah, well, you probably want me to say Marist here.
No, I want you to tell me what you think. I'm looking at one of them.
Yeah, look, if I'm on match day in Nelson, so in Blenheim, they're all good clubs to go to and watch, because most of the clubs are selling beer and on the things. Central's probably the only one in Harlequins, which is where you can't buy a beer and stand on the sideline.
And Marist.
If you're, no, I'm talking about Marlborough. If you're talking in Nelson and go and watch the Saturday, and I want Steph to come, she'll come to Stoke.
Yeah,
she can stand there, she can drink her couple of glasses of wine and enjoy it and chat. So Stoke on match day, Waimea to a lesser degree, and Wanderers to a lesser degree as well, where you can enjoy the atmosphere. I think it's something that I'd love at some stage to challenge the council on, is that you should be able to go to, like when you go to Australia. Les and I went to Brothers playing the grand final a couple of years ago in Brisbane, and it was just rocking. And if you want to have your people in your region having a responsible attitude towards alcohol, then you need to look at how you sell it responsibly. And it's not closing things down, and this is particularly if you're in a free alcohol zone, it's protecting it in a way that people and children can see how their parents drink responsibly. So those are the grounds. But if you're going for a club game, I'll just say this clearly, and bless his old socks, but there was nothing like a grand final day at Trafalgar Park and Francis Monopoly having a van on the side just stacked full of a couple of quiet beers. I think Trafalgar Park and Lansdowne on grand final day, nothing beats it.
Yeah. And that's all we got time for.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's good.
Did you?
No. That's all we got.
You're not
time
going to
for.
ask
Yeah,
you that
no, I
question?
will ask it. Your favourite, because then we can wrap this up.
Yeah.
I saw the last question. I thought,
Yeah,
no, we're gonna wrap up here.
Your favourite commercial manager to golf with?
So I think I answered that before when I said I had two commercial managers who both like golf. So Hugh Locke and Les Edwards. So look, that's the way it is.
Well,
Why
I'll tell you
don't we
what.
wrap this up and get out to the course?
Well, yes, and I'll tell you what. In Western Australia, that's the way you did business. It was you go and play golf, and everyone did their business on the golf course. So building relationships was what you seem to do over here, and I presume be the same in Nelson now.
Yeah, I think that's the funny thing. In Nelson, business is not done the way that Les and I grew up in.
Yeah.
We both, I had 16 years in Sydney, and obviously about 7 in Perth. Business is done on a Friday lunch or on a golf course.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the keys to, how we should roll, because you can get to know people in a completely different way.
Yeah. Well, in WA, every Friday there was some sort of corporate excuse to go and play golf,
100%.
and the guy organising it would take great care on who matches with who and who would need to match. And that's, you just met so many new people. And of course, ultimately, you found things in common and then business opportunities. And that's just the way they did it.
Yeah.
That's how you did it. So, yeah, but more golf, obviously. Les, that would be the answer. Hey, Tony, thanks very much for coming in. This is a mega marathon podcast, but very interesting because it's a big history, and you were there for, quite a large part of its success. So building it up to, to be so successful, and Les off often talks to our guests about those heady times, you could say, because really it was from the doldrums of almost getting kicked out of the comp and financial woes to building up to winning national premierships, who no one would have ever guessed that we'd reach there. So you're a big part of that, and everyone played their part in taking it to a higher level, and you managed to take it right to the top. So it was fantastic to hear all those,
I thought
those
from
stories.
From my perspective, it was an absolute privilege.
Mm.
I get up each day, you go to work. I just never called it work. It was a privilege to go to work with good people, but more importantly, it was a privilege to go to work in an industry that was just so much fun. And every 8 years of absolute fun. I'm worried about where rugby in the country is going at the moment, but I know there's some really good people throughout the country and this region as well that will remember that it's the game of the people. And the mantra that I always use with Les is that every decision we made, is this in the best interest of rugby? And if it was, we tick the box and go. So thanks very much for inviting me on. It was a privilege. I've enjoyed listening to you when I was in Perth. Obviously, Les would text it to me and say, here's my latest highlight of the week.
Fantastic. Well, great to have you here. Great to see that you're carrying on the traditions at Waihi Takaro Golf Course, and watch out anyone up there, because the boys are just about to go up and whack a few. Thanks very much again, Les.
Yeah,
enjoy.
Pleasure.
So big match this weekend.
Yeah, if anyone's got through this podcast, then they'll know that I'm going to predict Maris to win in an upset.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much to the Turf Hotel, Stan, and the team. You can catch this podcast on talknelson.co.nz, on Spotify, on MBS Talk Nelson, and also our social media channels. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll talk to you again next week.
The Mako Rugby Roundup. What's on, where, and when. It's the Talk of Nelson. NBS Talk Nelson.